Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our final webinar in our 7-part community learning series. My name is Laurel Williamson, and I am Albemarle County's Watershed Stewardship Manager, filling in as moderator today. Today's webinar will give you an introduction to the concept of stream restoration. Earlier this year, when we had asked our community members in Albemarle County what stream health related topics that they would like to learn about, stream restoration actually topped the list. So we were lucky to find 2 local experts to give you a perspective on why we might want to restore streams, and also to show you some examples of what that can look like in our local streams here in the Charlottesville area. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to note that these webinars are being held as part of Albemarle County's Stream Health Initiative. If you're not familiar with this initiative, I encourage you to visit publicinput.com/streamhealth to learn more and even to sign up to get updates about it. Like all the webinars that we've hosted this spring as part of the Stream Health Initiative, today's webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available to view on that website starting next week. So this can allow you to view the webinar again, or to even share it with your friends. And after I'm done talking here, I will put that web address in the chat box for you to click on, so you don't have to remember it. Next slide, please. I'd also like to share just some quick tips about Zoom for anyone who hasn't had a chance to experience this platform before. Today's event will be primarily presentation based, with a little bit of time reserved, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes reserved at the end for questions. You should see a Q&A icon in the webinar toolbar located at the bottom of your screen, and you may need to wiggle your cursor around at the bottom for the bar at the bottom to show up. You should see a Q&A box there. It's different from the chat box. So during the Q&A, during the presentations, if you have questions, feel free to type those questions in that Q&A box, and we'll reserve them for after the presentation. It doesn't look like we have anybody who's called in, so everybody should be able to use that Q&A box. Next slide, please. Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speakers, who have kindly offered their time and their knowledge for our benefit today. Our first speaker is our very own Stavros Kalos. Stavros has been a water resources engineer with Albemarle County for the past 6 years. Of most relevance to this presentation, his duties include identifying, prioritizing, managing, and accounting for stream restorations and many other types of stormwater projects that help the county achieve pollution reduction goals. Prior to his experience with the county, Stavros worked for a small water resources firm in Richmond, and there he assisted with design of various types of stormwater projects. He has an undergraduate degree in geology from William & Mary and a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from UVA. Our other speaker today is Kip Mumma. He is also a water resources engineer and is co-founder of Ecosystem Services, which is a local natural resource engineering and consulting company. He has 14 years of experience conducting engineering for stream and wetland restoration projects throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Kip graduated from Virginia Tech in civil engineering with a concentration in water resources. And he has spent untold hours counting pebbles in frigid streams and pondering the mechanics of sediment transport, which, after you hear from him today, you might also be inspired to do the same. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Stavros.
Hey everyone. Thanks for the great introduction, Laurel. Like Laurel mentioned, my name is Stavros Kalos. I'm a water resources engineer with Albemarle County local government. A lot of my, like she also mentioned, a lot of my work kind of focuses around really implementing the county's environmental program when it comes to where we put new stream restorations, what kind of projects we do, and how those are accounted. So along those lines, what Kip and I thought would be most useful to speak with you today about is a few major topics. Why do streams need restoration? Why are there programs for this in the first place? What is stream restoration? What does that even mean? What does the process look like? And also, what are the drivers of this work? Kip and I have worked together on several projects in Albemarle County, so I'm really going to talk about more kind of the zoomed out programmatic elements. Why on the whole do we value this and pursue this work? And Kip, being the expert that he is going to talk with you guys about a lot of specifics. What exactly does it mean to restore a stream? All you, Kip.
All right, thank you, Stavros, and thank you, Laurel, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with everybody today about this topic and kind of share some local information and local knowledge as well. I think that a lot of the topics that have been explored already cover some of this, so these may be repeats for those that have followed along with this series. But I think for the context of this presentation, it'll still be useful to kind of go over a few things. So streams and their floodplains provide us with a lot of social, economic, and different environmental benefits, or ecosystem services, as they're also called. Those include commercial, recreational fishing, swimming, kayaking, or even forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku. They also provide clean drinking water. There's flood regulation, nutrient and carbon cycling, and sequestration. And all of this is underpinned by these physical, chemical, and biological processes. And so this is really what collectively we call stream health. And so it's a condition of these physical, chemical, and biological conditions. When we look at a natural stream ecosystem, or better yet, looking at it from the perspective of calling it a high functioning stream ecosystem, what is it that we really see? So as you take a moment and look at this illustration and pick out some of the things that you see that you think might be important to this stream ecosystem. So I think one thing that is evident as you start exploring this illustration is just the abundance of different types of organisms, birds, amphibians, insects, fish, aquatic plants over here to the right, grasses, shrubs, trees, and all of these depend on different aspects of habitat that are created by the stream corridor. And streams can be thought of as reflections of the conditions and actions within the watershed. And so different land uses contribute to different stream health outcomes. I know this has been a topic that has been explored in this series. In this illustration, you can see different practices within an agricultural landscape. And all of these have different impacts to stream health. So runoff from agricultural fields might carry fertilizer, sediment, other pollutants. Historic drain pipes, as you can see in the bottom left, underlying potentially historic wetlands, the lack of riparian vegetation that might be evident in these watersheds, steep eroding banks, reduced bed form, and over widening. These are some of the characteristics of mainly impacts that can occur due to these land uses. It doesn't mean that all of these exist in watersheds that have agricultural land uses, but just some of the ones that we see frequently and that you would try to take note of in evaluating stream health in one of these corridors. In urban systems, certainly in the city and other urban areas, we're familiar with seeing some of these, and all these illustrations are somewhat dramatic in terms of the overlaying the different impacts. But in urban corridors, what we see is a competition for space really through the corridor. And so we have these different utilities that are also located within the stream corridor, such as sanitary sewer lines, storm sewer lines. We also see, we're drawn to streams and rivers, and so we frequently see paths and trails that are along these corridors as well. And so this competition for space in the built environment can start to constrain the stream and lead to some of the some issues. In addition to that, from the watershed, we might see different pollutants than we would in an agricultural watershed, such as trash, potentially petroleum or gases discharged to the stream, or other urban pollutants. Another characteristic of urban watersheds is the relationship between imperviousness on the x-axis there and stream quality or stream health on the y-axis. And this relationship is very well documented and has been the subject of numerous studies. And what we see here is really just as watershed impervious cover increases, then the stream quality decreases. And this is a useful relationship to keep in mind. It doesn't mean that all streams that are in urban watersheds are necessarily have low stream health. But I like this quote from the Committee on Reducing Stormwater Discharge Contributions to Water Pollution, where they said, not every degraded stream is a product of intense urban development, but all highly urban watersheds produce severely degraded receiving waters. So again, there is a range, and you can see that in this graphic here, that might occur given particular impervious cover, but it is a strong relationship that we see again and again. Now, it might be from agricultural activities in the watershed, historical agricultural activities, historical logging activities, or mill dams, which proliferated in the certainly the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s. And these mill dams, and combined with different actions in the watershed, such as logging or agricultural activity, sent a lot of fine sediment down into our stream valleys, and then that accumulated behind dams frequently. And this has started to contribute to a lot of the stream bank erosion that we start to see in our stream corridors. This is a fairly dramatic view of the South River, where some research has been conducted as well on this effect. Essentially, what's occurring here in these situations is that accumulated sediment behind a structure like a historic mill dam, that material accumulates, and then the stream subsequently drops down in elevation and starts working through that sediment, delivering it downstream. And that sediment can cause problems to aquatic life.
So if you've sat through any stream health sessions previously, this is a figure that is pretty likely that you've seen before. And it was no mistake for me to show it again. We all have particular interest in this group about local water quality, local stream health. So the figure you see right here is the results of surveys that have been done by the Department of Environmental Quality and also a local organization, Rivanna Conservation Alliance, where they go through and they basically count bugs that are living in the stream, in addition to taking various water quality samples. And the results of this, every bold line you see in this figure is a stream that has been assessed by one or the other of these groups. And the bold lines, the blue bold ones, means they've been assessed and they're fine. And the ones that have colors means that they have been assessed and the streams are in fact impaired. So down at the bottom right of this figure, you see a circle around benthic and bacteria impairments. These mean, what this means is that aquatic life, the bugs, the benthic macroinvertebrates that live in the streams that are either this maroon color or mixed with maroon and kind of an orange color, that all of these have been, there's a problem with the aquatic life there. And the major driver for these problems, based on every stressor analysis that's been done locally, is that sediment is the major contributor to this loss of benthic life and biodiversity in these streams. So just taking a quick look at this map, you can see that there's a big problem in Albemarle County with a lot of sediment smothering bugs. And the source of this sediment is largely the factors that Kip spent the last several minutes speaking about. Next slide, please. So this is an example. This table is from basically a pollution diet report for the Rivanna River watershed. So the purpose of this report, it was published in 2008. It looks at the different types of contributions of sediment into the main stem of the Rivanna River, recognizing that too much sediment is the main cause of the loss of benthic life in the Rivanna River. So what I put these red boxes around is the role of in-stream erosion in the source of that sediment. So collectively, based on this one analysis, it accounts for almost half of the total current sediment load into the Rivanna River. So this will segue kind of into why we want to consider stream restoration. A major outcome of these projects are that it directly reduces and ideally completely stops this process of erosion from existing streams with sediment inputs going downstream. Back to you, Kip.
So now that we have an understanding of kind of the issue at hand and what we might be facing from different watersheds, whether they're urban or agricultural, what do we do? What do we do about this? So one of the tools that we have is stream restoration, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. And stream restoration certainly isn't a silver bullet for all of the stream health issues that we might see in a particular stream corridor, but it is a tool that can start to assist in the recovery of an ecosystem. And that's really the main point of this effort, is to take a degraded system, one like the bottom right here, where we see considerable sediment that might be affecting aquatic life downstream. We look at that causal relationship, and then we try to understand how we might be able to assist in that recovery of an ecosystem. There's a lot of different methods, and we'll kind of take some examples or go through some examples of the different methods that we might use as practitioners to address these issues. We won't go over all of the methods, so there are a lot of different design and implementation methods that are being explored, but we'll give a kind of a sampling of them. And so this is just a kind of a useful, just conceptual model. On the left-hand side, we have ecological health, and then we have a time scale on the x-axis here. And all this is supposed to show is that when we look at our natural streams or high functioning stream systems, so these represent streams that are in largely undisturbed watersheds and that have a lot of those ecological values that we are concerned with and care about. There's some variability that you can see in terms of stream health given natural disturbance regimes, so large storm events or other impacts that might be relatively infrequent. And then we have on the blue here, a degraded stream, and we can see, we're a lot lower ecological health, and there's again that variability, but left alone, and if we don't disturb the watershed any further with any of these actions that might take place on the landscape, it would begin to recover. And this is obviously just a conceptual model. Every stream is different and has different resilience. But frequently, given legacy sediments or other impacts, that timeline of recovery is going to be significant. So we're talking decades, 100+ years. So what we're trying to do with stream restoration in particular is conduct a type of intervention that will move us closer to that high functioning system. So this is just a kind of a good example, conceptual model to have in mind. And one of the ways that we do that is by paying attention to how undisturbed or natural systems function, and also disturbed systems function. And by studying those, we can start to arrive at relationships, process relationships that help us understand how these streams function. I like this quote by Luna Leopold, one of the fathers of fluvial geomorphology, which is the discipline that really underpins a lot of this work. And what he's drawing on here is just how these systems evolved. So there's a balance or harmony in natural systems, which dictated by the laws of physics has gradually developed during the 4 billion years of Earth's history. Systems evolve gradually, slowly. And when we have practices on the landscape that disrupt that, it can alter the conditions, and it can take a long time also to rebound, as we've kind of gone over. And so now we're going to jump in and to some examples, some local examples mostly of stream restoration, and kind of go over the conditions and then the methods of restoration, and also discuss some of the drivers for these projects. We're not going to go into the weeds too much, so if there are questions, then certainly we can save those for the end and dive deeper, depending on the audience's interest. So Meadow Creek, which runs through Charlottesville, is probably known to most folks. And this picture is fairly dramatic, a little grainy, but fairly dramatic, showing just the height of the stream bank, and you can see trees that are being undermined in this graphic. And this is fairly typical, though certainly bank heights vary considerably depending on how much sediment has accumulated in the stream valley and then subsequently eroded, and depending on downstream conditions too. But you can see that this is going to be sending a lot of sediment downstream, and Meadow Creek is impaired for aquatic life due to sediment. So no surprise there. It's approximately 40% impervious drainage area, and it's a rather large drainage area at this point, about 4 square miles. Here's some other pictures just showing some of the erosion and due to trees falling in and other actions in the watershed. We see can kind of see some of the layers and the horizons in the soil as well, but a lot of alluvium here deposited throughout the years that stream is now working through. Another picture of that. And so this project was initiated by the Nature Conservancy, who operates the Virginia Aquatic Resources Trust Fund. And so this project represents a project that was conducted for mitigation purposes. So to offset impacts within the watershed and other locations by restoring and improving the conditions, the physical, chemical, and biological conditions of the stream corridor. So you can see a section of the restored stream, and just for this one at least, just take a moment to identify what you see here and the differences from maybe some of the previous pictures, other than it was taken with a better camera. So here we start to see that by introducing kind of gradual meanders to a stream, we might change the energy and the way in which it transports sediment, and also producing opportunities for habitat. So refugia for fish and other aquatic organisms we have installed here. What we find in natural systems frequently is some type of undercut bank with a lot of woody debris that accumulates, and that has partly to do with the morphology of streams and the meanders themselves. And so we install these structures and attributes in stream restoration projects to emulate and mimic the way that these systems build in kind of undisturbed areas, and we use those as references. And then in addition to that, since we can't just use references because the conditions in the watershed might be, or will in most cases be, different than what those natural systems have evolved to have. We also use different models to predict how different interventions might affect stream health and overall, and in particular, erosion, if that happens to be what is impairing the stream. So this is a good example. Videos are always good to kind of show what we're talking about. This is just after restoration was finished. We can see kind of the meandering stream through this area. And so this is how it responds to a storm event. This is about a 2.8-inch storm event. So I think given the time period, it was probably about a 10-year, at least let's call it a 10-year storm, or a storm event that has a 10% chance of occurring in any given year. And you can kind of see how after the storm event has passed through, it's deposited a lot of fine sediment here that wasn't there previously. It's deposited a lot of organic material from upstream, some wood and other debris, and it's deposited all of this primarily on what we call the inner meander bend. And so providing these areas through restoration of temporary sediment storage is also an important process that streams serve in managing the sediment and making sure that that sediment doesn't impact aquatic life that might be using other aspects of this, other areas of the stream. So this was right after construction. So you see it's not much vegetation that has really taken off in the floodplain. So if we go instead to a few months later, in September, we start to see vegetation taking off. And one thing that you'll notice is that sediment doesn't appear to be there within the stream. It's more restricted to this inner meander. And so now the vegetation has come in. It starts to provide more roughness in the floodplain, which reduces the velocity and the energy in the stream. And you can see now, after a storm event, which was about a one-year storm event, or a storm that has a 100% chance of occurring every single year. So a smaller storm event, but still significant in getting out of its banks, to lay down a lot of the vegetation on the banks. And largely these banks are protected now because of the vegetation and the access to the floodplain that the stream now has. You can see a large log that was deposited towards the back here in a previous storm event too, that didn't get moved again. So that storage capacity that restored systems can provide is one of the benefits of stream systems. And you can imagine in a stream that has high eroding banks on either side, that storage doesn't exist on the floodplain. The storage only exists within the channel. And that's what contributes to a lot of the degraded and impacts to aquatic life within the stream system. So another project also in the Meadow Creek watershed, but up towards Barracks Road on Cedar Court. Again, a fairly dramatic eroding outer meander bend. Another picture of it here. And this project was conducted as part of a development project, actually, and the regulations require that the developer provide both an adequate or discharge the stormwater to an adequate channel that would convey downstream in a non-erosive way, and also to improve the stream buffer in this location. So you can see where that high eroding stream bank was right here. That bank has been reduced. A different pattern of the stream has been constructed, and again we've established some floodplain area for that storage and to help reduce the energy in the stream channel. Unfortunately, while taking some pictures, we got some ducks that have moved in and decided to use the stream. Let me check out the time here. I think it's about 15 minutes or so. Another driver of stream restoration can be to provide a fish passage upstream. So again, we mentioned these dams that we have. This was a small recreational agricultural dam that was put in place, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, around 1950s or so, on a tributary to the Meachams River. And probably other dams that you're more familiar with, say the Woolen Mills Dam that was removed in 2007, also done for to help with fish passage. So fish that migrate upstream, such as the American shad rather, and other organisms that migrate upstream, it's important for them to have that connectivity, and dams provide or create an obstruction for that passage. And so a landowner took it upon themselves as an aerial of that area, but the landowner decided to do this on their own property and to improve both aquatic organism passage and also for aesthetic purposes. So they were interested in creating this natural system on their property. So post-restoration, you can see a lot of that material had been removed from the impoundment. The dam was also removed, and now a much smaller meandering stream works its way through that area. And so a lot of different planting. This area had a lot of deer, and so trying to protect some of the vegetation while it gets established from deer. But all in all, this is going to produce the aquatic species can migrate up this stream channel more easily, and it also manages energy moving through the system, and is well connected to the stream's floodplain, again, as kind of a central characteristic of these restored systems. A lot of the wood and other material was incorporated back into the stream as well to help with that kind of the jump starting the system and contributing to improvements to aquatic life and also habitat. So another project here, a tributary to Ivy Creek in Albemarle County, again, kind of showing these accumulated sediments in this valley, and you can see kind of an underlain historic wetland soils as well, the darker color down here, which might indicate where more saturated soils and historic wetlands might have existed. So you can see again here, the stream was eroding considerably, and that sediment moving down into Ivy Creek. Just after construction, you can see again the use of a lot of wood to again help reduce the energy and also to provide habitat. So trying to accomplish those dual purposes, and also cutting a floodplain in this area and upstream, actually bringing the stream higher in elevation to connect it to its historic or to its current floodplain is another methodology that can be used, again, to get those larger storm events out of the channel and onto the floodplain. So 1 year after construction, a lot of the vegetation has taken off and protect the stream banks. And then this was 2.5 years or so after construction. You can see a lot of the vegetation that's been planted has really come up and And I think it's a good demonstration that I try to tell people, if we do a good job, then you can't really tell that anybody was ever there. The idea is to, again, emulate these natural systems, and so they shouldn't necessarily look like built systems. A project that we did with the county, wanted to say the driver of this project, also a different driver, was this was conducted as part of a nutrient bank. And so the reductions in sediment and phosphorus and nitrogen that this project achieved will offset other impacts to the pollutant discharge through the stormwater program. And so this is actually a private nutrient bank or mitigation bank that is able to take those reductions and then sell them to, say, developers or localities that have an obligation to reduce pollutants due to their activities. So a different mechanism there, a different driver for conducting this work. This project is known as River Run, and this is a project done with the county. And you can see again here, this stream is dropped in elevation. There was a downstream dam that was probably controlling the stream bed elevation for some time, and then it was breached. This is a tributary to the Rivanna River. So as those tributaries dropped in elevation, this stream also dropped in elevation, and now a lot of that energy is on the banks, and again, contributing a lot of sediment downstream, undermining trees. Trees were falling in the channel as well. Another picture kind of looking upstream with some of our staff there for scale. So again, seeing how the stream is now adjacent to the valley wall and has downcut considerably. And the restored condition, this is just highlighting the stream was actually raised in elevation, and some floodplain cutting as well, but raised in elevation. Again, the geometry of the stream channel is influenced by these relationships that we see in natural stream corridors and natural stream systems, integrating a lot of wood and matter into the stream channel to kind of help reduce energy and also jumpstart this system in terms of how that material breaks down and then is food for different aquatic life. Another picture of that as well here.
I really appreciate the walkthrough of all these local projects that you've worked on. I hope it was helpful for the audience to get just a crash course of what work that's actually been done locally. I saw a question come in about the human element of these projects that's really relevant to the way that we're going to tie this presentation together. Here's a quote from a paper that came out in 2015 looking at what types of projects, what types of stream restoration projects are driven by different social forces. A really interesting combination of kind of science and the human element by these people who are experts in stream restoration in the US. And the quote is, you probably already read it, the quote is that social forces shape the morphology of restored streams. So even though we have all of these different ecological and kind of regulatory drivers like Kit mentioned, it really, the thing that drives these projects is what we as a society and as individual organizations like Albemarle County Ecosystem Services, what we collectively value. Next slide, please. So we have, there are a lot of different drivers of stream restorations, and I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. The first one is basically an infrastructure protection, aesthetic, ecological uplift, just non-mandated inherent value in these projects, that it might just make your property better in some way. And there are a variety of different kind of regulated mandatory drivers for these projects. This would warrant a whole presentation, and we're not going to go into really any depth here, but the different projects that KIP went through all sort of fulfill a different regulatory driver as well. Total maximum daily loads are a significant part of our program in Albemarle County, and something I'm going to focus a bit on for our last few minutes. But we also have mitigation banking, like one project that's been done here. Nutrient banking for stormwater quality. If you want to sell those credits that shows you've improved stormwater, you can do that through stream restorations. And finally, there's a way to show that you've satisfied stormwater quantity requirements by saying that you are discharging water from a new development into a stream that is restored and can accommodate that. So, the takeaway here is that there are a variety of different drivers, each with their own types of incentive structures and way that you weigh the value of these things. Next slide, please. So, for example, of a regulatory driver in action, a social force in action, I wanted to talk a little bit about Tmdl credits. Tmdl is something I mentioned earlier as kind of a pollution budget for these different projects for different watersheds. You may have recalled the table that I showed toward the beginning of the projects. What I have down here in red at the bottom is basically an estimate of the existing load of sediment and coming from the Albemarle County urban area, essentially, and also the % reduction that's required from that urban area. Next, please. So this image over here on the right, in kind of this maroon color in the very center, you can see what's known as the MS4 area for Albemarle County. This is basically our census designated urban area. And outlines around that, everything in light blue with a gray outline, these are the different watersheds for which we have established pollution budgets or total maximum daily loads within Albemarle County. So the example that I wanted to get to, and again, this could be, I realize I'm going somewhat quickly to get to this example. It's a very long and complex conversation, but the takeaway point from this is that our MS4 permit, the regulatory framework that we're under, specifically incentivizes urban stream restoration projects, meaning that they are within this orange area. So this social force in action, regardless of the inherent benefits of doing rural projects versus urban projects, it drives us towards urban projects. Next slide, please. And the incentive that drives us towards urban projects, it's a lot of very complex accounting that in the end, you come up with an amount of pollution that you can take credit for and say, we've removed this from the Chesapeake Bay or local watersheds. So this table over here on the right, I wanted to give you just a quick snapshot of like how meaningful stream restorations have been for us to date. So the title of this image is the total Chesapeake Bay Tmdl credit that we've gotten so far, expressed in pounds of phosphorus removed. We need to remove phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment to meet this mandate. We are almost complete with all the credits that we're required to get, but down here in green at the bottom, the biggest single slice of any credit that we have gotten from voluntary projects has been from stream restorations. So these are, we have found that they are a cost-effective and meaningful way to meet this mandate for our Tmdl program. Next slide, please. And when we're looking at how we're going to meet this mandate, a way that I think we're probably all used to thinking about things is what benefit can we get per dollar? How much phosphorus or nitrogen or sediment can we remove throughout this through using the stream restoration practice per dollar spent on the project? And so here is an example, and also it begs a question of how to balance these different social values. We clearly balance the value of reducing pollution from downstream waterways, and stream restorations, the way we do them, are very cost effective in doing that. But anytime you need to maximize multiple variables, for example, if we also want to maximize local ecosystem uplift, other social benefits, it gets really difficult to maximize multiple variables at the same way. And so the takeaway point that I want to leave with everybody is that throughout all the different various drivers of these projects, it's a challenge for everybody involved in a long conversation for how to balance these different priorities. What really matters most per dollar spent on the project. So I hope if that you'll take that away and realize that there's a lot of different objectives that can be achieved, and that each of these projects are driven by our social belief on what matters most. So I think with that, I will send it to Laurel to close us out.
All right, Stavros, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kip, for transporting us outside here this afternoon in front of our screens. That was really lovely. So we have some time for questions now. It looks like we have a couple in the Q&A box already. You also have the opportunity to raise your hand, your virtual hand, I believe. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little raise hand tool. If you do want to ask a question out loud, then we can unmute you. But let's go ahead and start with the ones that are in our Q&A box. I'll actually start with Andrea's question, because this is in relation to Stavros, your last slide. She had a question about, can you define grandfathered sources? And Kip, if you wouldn't mind going back one slide, we can see that pie chart that has a little note there at the bottom about new and grandfathered sources. That certainly is not talking about our elders necessarily. Can you explain what that's about?
Absolutely. And when I mentioned the accounting is complex and could take up an entire presentation of its own, this graphic right here is exactly what I had in mind. But when we account for pollution reduction from various projects and practices per state guidance for accounting for the Chesapeake Bay Tmdl project, for Chesapeake Bay Tmdl compliance, there are a couple of different categories of ways that we can get credit towards those reductions from BMPs that were built to meet development requirements or for other purposes aside voluntary government Tmdl practices. And so you'll see actually that the majority of the total credit we've claimed so far is from a combination of these new and grandfathered sources, new development offsetting more pollution than was required, and also BMPs installed prior to when we implemented this program. And the basic, I'm trying to think of a few sentence explanation. The reason we were able to get credit for these is that DEQ provides an option for if BMPs were built to greater standards than the state standards at the time previous to Virginia Stormwater Management Program regulations, then the local MS4 was able to take excess credit for whatever was removed beyond what was required. And thanks to having more stringent stormwater requirements than state standards, Albemarle County found ourselves in a unique position to be able to claim a lot of credits from these previous projects. And Andrea, it's an important and a bizarre conversation, and I would be, if anybody wants to talk further about this offline, I would be happy to. I realize that I didn't. There's probably still a lot of head scratching right now.
As you said, it's complex for sure.
Yeah,
it requires more time. We've got a lot of great questions from Ty Smith here. Let's see here. How have you had success? I think this might be a question for Kip. How have you had success in these urban stream projects to create an invitation to the stream while protecting the stream and the individual as well?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it kind of is implicit of the connection that we have to these streams and these areas. I mean, I feel like we all gravitate towards them, the running water, and so it is an area where folks find a restored system to be an inviting place to go and to walk. So a lot of these streams had that we've done, and some of the ones that we just went over had kind of specific trail systems that were done either at the same time or that were accommodated, and so then either the trail itself, or different viewing benches, for example, would be kind of incorporated into the restoration project and kind of taken into consideration. So trying to provide areas that are that people can see that this is going to be the easiest way to get down to the stream, and there's a bench right there, that helps. So that's kind of just controlling kind of where the kind of maybe the flow of people might go to, and then in some other cases, actually installing fences. We have done that as well, in cases where there's deer predation or a concern over just protecting certain species that were planted. Fencing specifically around the planting has been done too. But it is just something that we have to take into consideration for each project, and there might be unique concerns, and also a bit of adaptive management too, as we start to see where people go and where people tend to kind of walk through a project.
May I add a short point to that?
Yeah, please.
From the local government perspective, a lot of times we find that the best, most cost-effective projects for pollution removal will happen to be on private property, and we're used to doing that. We get easements. We work with the property owner to get permission to build and maintain these projects, and it works pretty well. But a lot of times, as you might imagine, put yourself in the shoes of a property owner, you don't necessarily want to open up that property to public use at all times. And so, what I finished on about balancing priorities, this can be a very difficult one to balance. We really want to have public facing projects, but often it comes with trade-offs, perhaps in cost effectiveness for pollutant removal. So, take what you will from that. But I wanted to add that, like, even though we strive for it, it's not equally feasible in all cases.
There is one more. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kip.
I was just gonna, because there was another question in his that was kind of related, and so he mentions, do you have any lessons learned from pool depth sizing in urban projects for public safety? And that is something that's come up on some projects that we have had that were located in parks. And I think Stavros kind of hit the nail on the head that the entire process of design is one of kind of navigating constraints and looking at these trade-offs. And so in this particular area, there was a public education component of it to talk to folks about some of the conditions they might see post-restoration, and also the installation of signage that can help communicate to folks that might be in the area, both in terms of just high water and also pool depths. And so those are on larger systems where that was implemented.
All right, great. Another couple questions. How have you had success with long-term invasive species management in these urban projects, especially with respect to the mitigation bank projects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very varied, I'd say, and so every site will have different concerns in terms of invasive species. Sometimes the invasive species might persist in the restored site, but also not impact the native vegetation from becoming established, or at least the woody vegetation becoming established. And so that can be a challenge depending on what we're trying to control in the area here. Certainly things like stiltgrass, Japanese stiltgrass, and things like Japanese knotweed, and other invasives that are particularly aggressive can require more significant management plans. I will say though that again, some species do persist in these sites, and what we try to do is just make sure that native species that we want to see are not impacted by that, or that the particularly for projects that are done specifically for halting erosion, again, that is something that has to be done. So if an invasive species is impacting erosion rates, then that management of the invasive species will have to is more concerning and has to be a priority.
And just to quickly add one point, this is an example of another trade-off or a balance of what are your real objectives. Not in particular is notoriously difficult to control. And I imagine that among this group, glyphosate is probably not, we don't really like that word, most of us. We don't like using Roundup, but it's a really, if you want to control Japanese knotweed, there are few effective ways, and that's generally the most effective one. And so balancing, like, how much time do you really have to devote to labor? How strong is your dislike of Roundup? It's difficult conversations, particularly with invasive species management.
Mm-hmm. True. What successful alternative approaches have you taken with respect to clearing and grubbing and base flow diversion? This is someone who knows a little bit about stream restoration, asking some technical questions.
Yeah. So it depends on the restoration site, of course. I guess a alternative approach to clearing and grubbing and base flow diversion. I can think of, for some of projects that are done on headwater tributaries that might be ephemeral or intermittent. Sometimes those projects where we'll be working directly in the stream, we've put in actually base flow diversion that essentially are pipes that then are buried to control base flow while the project is being constructed. And so those are, again, for more ephemeral or intermittent streams. During restoration, most of the ones that we showed in the slides that the projects that we were just showing were pump around. So they did require pumping base flow around the construction site. So that's what's termed working in the dry, where the construction site is actually dry from base flow. The work is completed each day, and then base flow returned to the stream. I think that there's some improvement that can occur, and as we become as an industry just more of a lighter touch, so to speak, or less invasive approaches to stream restoration, we start to see less clearing and grubbing required. The River Run project, we tried to reduce the extent of clearing and impact the trees as much as feasible, and part of that was bringing the stream back up to its current floodplain elevation instead of cutting a new floodplain, which would require the removal of more vegetation. So similarly to all of our answers, there are trade-offs and that we're trying to evaluate during the design process to see how we can minimize impacts to the corridor and the aquatic and terrestrial life that exists currently, while still getting it on that trajectory of higher ecological value, higher functioning, and in all the cases that we're looking at here, reductions in export of pollutants downstream, namely sediment.
Great. I think we can barely squeeze in this last question. Have you worked with the Ravenna Trail Foundation on how to create or maintain trails along the Ravenna or its tributaries without further impacting the streams? Either one of you want to chime in on that?
Is this at all, I know you guys are doing a Ravenna corridor assessment, Kip. Is this at all relevant to that question?
Yeah, I think so, and also the project that I shared that was upstream on Meadow Creek, the term Cedar Court, that actually intersected the Ravenna Trail, and there were accommodations for kind of a low water crossing. Those are challenging and they may not always be ideal for crossing streams, and sometimes bridges are also an appropriate alternative. But we do see where, as the Ravenna in particular, and this was part of we're completing a corridor study and looking at the conditions of the Ravenna River, the condition of the banks, and different constraints and opportunities there. There are several locations where the trail is being undermined by basically widening and that stream bank erosion, then kind of widening the stream channel and starting to affect that area. So I wouldn't say in those cases that the Ravenna Trail itself or trail systems in general are always the main culprit in terms of what's contributing to that bank erosion. It's just that the planning efforts at the time didn't envision the stream bank necessarily eroding to that degree. And that is a difficult thing to predict. And we're hoping to get better at that and locate trails further away from the stream. One lesson and takeaway, I think, in general is that streams need space, and the more space we can give them and accommodate the better. But that's part of that design process, is looking for where those trails can be located and not impact those stream functions that are important.
Great. Thank you, Kip. Great points. Well, would you advance one last slide, please, if you could? And that will show us the website address again, publicinput.com/streamhealth, if you want to watch this webinar again or watch the previous 6 that we've already held. Thank you to everybody who joined us today, and especially for those who have been able to come to multiple webinars. It's great to have your participation. And if you are interested in helping us figure out how we can improve stream health in Albemarle County, especially our rural areas, give us a look up on here or contact us, and we'll get you connected with the Stream Health Initiative. I hope you have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.